Okay, Floating Gardens has got a lot of questions about aquaponics already, and I have been honestly trying to avoid them a little bit, so I think maybe doing some short video blogs here to help explain some of the general concepts would help. So here's today's first one. It's a basic one. It's called pH. It stands for potential for hydrogen. It's the way that we measure the acidity in the water. This is something that's super important if you want to be a living being. So even a basic understanding will really help your backyard hobbyist. People in the commercial environment know how this works, so I'm not going to include them when I say this video would help them. But let's just do a quick overview and then explain why it's important to aquaponics. Okay, so here's my line. It goes from 0 to 14. In the middle, obviously, would be 7. Now, when I measure pH, I want to know how acidic the water is. 7 is considered neutral. This is where crystal clear water would be found. On the right here, it would be something that's called basic or caustic. That would be household cleaners and a lot of other stuff. On the left here is acidic. That's vinegar, that's stomach acid, anything that is acidic. We also call it corrosive. So maybe you've heard that term. Battery acid is corrosive, right? Now here's why that matters. Your fish are going to like a certain pH. Your plants, your bacteria, everything is going to like a different pH. And that can be a problem if you don't know what they are. Now fish typically like a pH pretty close to 7, somewhere in this range. Okay? Your plants can vary a lot depending on what they are. Blueberries on the left here like it very acidic, but other plants like it up into the basic range. Probably not very far though. Your bacteria, on the other hand, in fact, I'm going to put plants more like this. Your bacteria, on the other hand, are going to have a completely separate range like this, maybe. Okay, so most aquaponics experts, most gardeners, most chemists would think, okay, this is going to be my ideal pH right here, and they'd be typically correct, right? If you get pretty close to 7, everything in the system is going to be somewhat happy, although it is not ideal. The bacteria may prefer it to be more basic, right? And your plants may prefer it to be more acidic, etc. So if we want to maximize our yield, we kind of need to understand what we're looking at when we're reading our pH. Now, here's the problem. With a new aquaponics system, let's start with what a real aquaponics system would look like. Let's say you have a 5-year-old commercial farm and everything's running perfectly. You would see your ammonia levels every day do this when you feed the fish. Okay, they come up, and then the bacteria breaks the ammonia down, and the ammonia disappears. What replaces it is a nitrite. So as the ammonia is broken down, you see maybe the nitrites show up, and a couple hours later, your nitrites have peaked out. Now, a nitrite, although still toxic to plants and life in general, is not nearly as dangerous as ammonia and can be tolerated. And it's the first step in the nitrogen cycle, so we need it. Okay, after your nitrites are created, the bacteria will break it down further and it will create a nitrate, so it'll do something like this. Now, if you have a lot of plants in your system, your nitrates may not even show up because this is what the plants eat, right? So if your nitrate levels are really high, it might suggest that you have room for more plants because you have plenty of nutrition available. Or maybe you have a nutrition deficiency that's preventing your plants from growing very quickly. Maybe you need to add some more iron to the system or calcium, whatever your deficient is based on your fish feed. Okay, so let's look at what a new system would look like, and here is where the problem lies. Okay, in a new system, your bacteria cycle isn't really set up yet, so your ammonia might do something more like this. Right, it might take a day or two for your ammonia to disappear. And of course that's bad because you need to feed the fish and they want to live and they don't want to swim around in their own pee because it'll kill them. Can you imagine that? Okay, and maybe your nitrites will just kind of slowly try and come up, and then maybe they'll take just as long. So this is not good, right? These are toxic chemicals, and we don't want that to happen. So when you start with an aquaponics system, pardon me, Zoe, our dog here at the office has decided that she needs to be involved in the lecture. When you have ammonia generated in the system, you need to pay attention to how quickly it's being consumed by the bacteria and make sure that you're not overloading your fish, right? If you have a bunch of fish and you don't have your plants in yet, or you don't have a ton of them growing at full size yet, it's important to understand that this can be a problem. And your pH can mislead you. So when I'm in my ammonia cycle here, I'm going to see a pH of, say, maybe 8.1, okay? But by the time it has created a nitrite and then eventually a nitrate, let's hope it comes back down because my plants have eaten all the wonderful fertilizer I've given them, you're going to end up with a pH of more like 6.5, okay? So depending on how old your system is, you might not see this 6.5 take place because your nitrates aren't being produced at a very high rate. Okay, so if your system is young and you're seeing stuff in the 7.5 range, that's okay. All right, your bacteria just aren't there yet. They need to colonize further. They need to breed. All right, now if your system is a year old and you're still above 7, then you might have a problem. So you want to look. Do you have limestone in your media bed? That'll force the pH up a little bit. Are you putting hard water in? You know, what's your municipal water's pH level? Find out. Maybe you have some kind of a contaminant getting in. But if your system is new, it's not uncommon for you to be in this range. Okay. Now, if you have something that's over a year old, you're going to want to be in the 6 to 7 range here typically. So make sure that when you're taking these readings that you understand that the pH fluctuates based on where I am in my ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate levels. Okay. So if I measure and I see my ammonia levels are really high and my pH is kind of high, don't add lemon juice to bring the pH down. Okay. You need to oxygenate your biofilter or make it bigger or something like that because it's a bacteria problem, not a pH problem. Now, if you have a high pH and your ammonia levels are very low, then you have a contaminant, right? Like, let me give you a scenario. I've got a buddy who was using the wrong kind of media. It wasn't inert, and this is what took place. His ammonia levels never got very high, and his nitrite levels never got very high, and his nitrates never existed, because the plants would soak them up right away. All right, this is one of the most ideal scenarios for your aquaponics system, right? You don't want ammonia or nitrites to be showing up because it means that it's not being broken down, and you don't want your nitrates showing up because it means that your plants are eating them. This is the ideal. However, his pH was 8.4. It killed his fish, okay? And as a result, he went, after he cried about it, and we talked about it, and we tried to figure it out. It was simple. His media was a kind of rock that had a lot of contaminants involved, and it doesn't matter what it was, but it was affecting his pH level. Okay, so that is a situation where you might need to address what you're using in your media beds, or perhaps the pipe you're using is not inert. Did you use some kind of a metallic pipe that contaminated the water, or do you use PVC? What was it? So start looking at your system for contaminants. Now in a new situation, brand new aquaponics system, we saw something like this for his ammonia, and it was just barely coming down, and I didn't see any nitrites or nitrates, which meant that the bacteria cycle barely existed, and his pH came in 6.8. It was perfect. And he said, I don't understand what's happening. Well, I knew right away what the problem was, right? If your ammonia isn't disappearing and your pH is low, that is only because you're in there trying to force the pH down. So he was adding maybe a little lemon juice or vinegar. I could never get him to admit what it was, but that's what was taking place. He was adding something to bring the pH down. Now, that is classic, right? You're treating the symptom and not the disease. So before you start focusing on the pH in your system, remember what it's related to, right? It's directly correlated to your nitrogen cycle. So test for your ammonia, test for your nitrites, test for your nitrate. Those tests are at the pet store. People have them for every fish tank on Earth, right? At least for the ammonia. And pay attention to what's up, right? Don't let your ammonia levels be high and just think you can bring the pH down, because you can't. That's not how this works. So make sure that you look at both of these when making a decision with your aquaponics system. It is almost impossible to have a system that's in the basic range if your nitrates are being produced, right? If my ammonia is coming down the way it should be, I feed my fish, my ammonia spikes, and then it comes back down, and then my nitrites spike and comes back down, and my nitrates come back up, and my plants eat most of them. This is overall an acidifying process. So this 6.8 would be perfect for a guy who has this bacteria cycle in place. If it's not happening, you maybe need to get more air into the system. You need aerobic bacteria, not anaerobic bacteria, or you might not have enough room for your bacteria to grow. If you're not using media beds, if you're using just a float bed or something like that, no bacteria. There's no room for it. So don't underestimate how important your bacteria are. They are what powers your aquaponics system. Okay, if you have any questions, just put it in the comments below. That's probably a little confusing. I'm a bit tired here. I'm going to head home for the night, but I'll watch for comments and I'll go ahead and answer them as they come. Talk to you guys later.